Hey folks, welcome to another day, another unboxing. Yes, you're reading it correctly. This is the Huawei P40 Pro. I've got one and I'm here to unbox it for you. Check it out. Big focus on the app gallery since there's no GMS. So they're just putting the big logo here. P40 Pro with a Leica branding. As you know, there's also a P40 and a P40 Pro Plus. This is just the Pro. Huawei logo on top. IMEI's at the bottom, and here in the back there's not too much, just the usual. All right, let's get started, shall we? Dun, 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 dun. Boom. Ooh, little Huawei inscription. This is just printed, there's nothing in here. The phone, so let's take a look at that in a minute. Then there's a divider, and the divider includes a little pocket here with some stuff. Let's have a look. So we've got a sleeve and a SIM removal tool, and I suppose there's some documentation maybe in the final version. This is a pre-production box. So the case, whatever you want to call this, usual Huawei's TPU, gel case. These are really nice. They actually don't yellow with time. They're really high quality. If you want to protect your phone a little bit out of the box, this is nice to have. Not all markets are going to get this, I don't think. And then we've got some chargers and things, as you'd expect. So this is kind of crazy because this supports 40-watt charging over USB. It's pretty much what Huawei has been doing all along. They use a proprietary charger. You have to use the supplied cable with it and you get 40 watt. But it's also PD compliant, so if you plug this and this cable into another phone, you get PD charging. And if you plug the phone into a PD charger, it works. I think up to 18 watts or something. So I'll leave this up so you can see the specs. This is basically the same charger we've seen on the Mate 30 Pro and I believe the P30 Pro. They've all been doing 40 watts for a while. So nothing too exciting here. Then we have the USB Type A, as you can see here, to Type C on the other side. Notice the purple accent inside. I don't know if you can see that. We need some light. There you go. So it's purple. That's basically to tell you this is for super fast charging. So you have to use this cable with this charger to get the fast charging. That's nothing new. Same with Oppo, OnePlus, etc. Now the earbuds here look very Apple-y, like typical Huawei. You can see the mic pod, but it's USB-C, which means this does not have a headphone jack. No surprise. Huawei's been doing without headphone jacks for a while on their flagships. So that's it in the box, folks. Not too much here. Let's focus on the phone real quick because that's, I think, way more exciting. All right. So I think I can push this out. Yeah, look at that. Let's do this. And then more importantly, let's remove that IMEI sticker in the back. Pretty sure it's there. There we go. Not for sale because I think this again is a review unit from Huawei, so probably is a pre-production device. Final hardware, but not quite 100% final software. I'm not honestly quite sure, but wow, look at that pearlescent white. Isn't that something? It's beautiful. It's hard to explain. It's basically the best description I can give you is pearlescent white. It is kind of has a bit of a rainbow sheen to the whole thing. So here's that crazy camera system. I'm going to talk to you folks about this in a minute. There's no screen protector pre-applied on this, which is sometimes the case with Chinese phones. Let me turn this on. So as you know, the big Achilles heel for Huawei, at least for us in the West, is the lack of GMS, the lack of Google mobile services. On the Mate 30 Pro, that was the first phone, and then a bunch of phones since then. Ooh, they've tried to plug that gap with the app gallery and, of course, HMS, Huawei Mobile Services. But unfortunately, it's still not quite there, in my opinion, in terms of replacing Google's offering. Notice this screen is really interesting. So first of all, it waterfalls a little bit in both directions, left and right, but also has a bit of a waterfall on the top. You can see here from the corners, right, how this is raised just right there, and in the bottom as well, see? And there. So It waterfalls both this way, but also that way and that way. And that's kind of the thing here. It gives this feeling of very little bezel all the way around because of it. There's a little more at the bottom, it's probably where the ribbon cable is. It's a beautiful OLED panel, as you'd expect. It's 6.58 inches across. It is weird resolution at 1200 by 2640 pixels. So 1200 by 2640, so a little more than Full HD, but a little less than 2K. So interesting choice, I'm not quite sure why that is. You can see there's a camera pod here with dual cameras, but this also has a 3D Face ID sensor, like one of those infrared 3D sensors like the iPhone uses, and a bunch of other Huawei phones have used, like the Mate 30 and the Mate 20 in the past. Technically speaking, Huawei phones are always at the top of their game. I feel like they nail it in terms of hardware, and this is nothing different, right? So very exciting. Now, the other thing I want to tell you about is what's inside. This is a Kirin 990 chip like the Mate 30 Pro, but it's the latest one with built-in 5G. So there's kind of two versions of the Kirin 990. There's a non-5G where you can use a separate 5G modem and a built-in 5G. This is the mother of them all. It's the built-in 5G. And the Kirin 990 is very competitive with things like Snapdragon 855 Plus, Snapdragon 865. So it's a pretty solid offering. 8 gigs of RAM, and you have an option between 128 gigs or 256 gigs of storage, UFS 3.0 of course. There is a 4200 milliamp hour battery in this thing. For a phone that's not super massive and super thick, this is actually a pretty decent sized battery. I would have liked to see something a little bigger because with 5G and this crazy camera system that I'm going to discuss in a minute, it's going to be a bit power hungry. But again, you know, Huawei's chips are very efficient, and on top of that, like Apple, they're able to integrate vertically between the hardware and the software and optimize their version of Android significantly for their chips. And so I've always found battery life on these phones to be really rock solid. This has 5G. On paper, it has 5G support for AT&T, so it'll be interesting to see if that works. I'm talking about low-band 5G, 850 megahertz N5. I'm not sure it'll work, but I'll let you know as soon as I try it out. Same with GMS. As you know, I was able to put GMS on my Mate 30 Pro and my Honor phones that I've received since the Huawei ban took place, and I've been able to use them as normal Android phone with Google services. We don't know if this P40 Pro will work with GMS in terms of the, hacks. They're not hacks, but they're workarounds to get GMS back on the phone. For me, that's going to be a deal breaker. I really need GMS because my business runs on Google's apps. So, hopefully they support it. Hopefully it works. Now, let's talk about those cameras because, oh my God, there's so much to talk about here. This is like quite the mother. I didn't mention it, but you don't just have 3D Face ID here. You have a in-display fingerprint sensor, of course, just like the P30 Pro and the Mate 30 Pro. Nothing's changed on that front. You have wireless charging, of course, as well, with reverse wireless charging. So it supports fast wireless charging. I think it's also 40 watts, which is insane. It requires a dedicated wireless charger for it. Of course, it's compatible with Qi wireless charging as well if you want a slow wireless charge. So that's it in terms of, the details, the guts. But let's talk about cameras. Let's start with the front because the back is where it's really important. I want to keep you guessing. So here you go. In the front, you have this dual camera system, right? 32 megapixel f/2.2 main camera with 0.8 micron pixels. And then there's a time of flight depth sensing camera with an IR emitter and an IR camera receiver. It supports 1080p 30 frame per second video. I'm not sure about 4K, but we'll find out. I hope it does 4K because today flagship should really be supporting 4K. So that's what you got up here. Now in the back, in this massive, beautiful pod here, a whole bunch of cameras. There's actually 4. There's a microphone. You can see it here, right there. There's a dual color, dual LED flash, and then 3 cameras. That bottom one, there's not much to talk about here. It's a time of flight sensor. Same as the front. So, can you use for portrait mode autofocus or if you want to do AR type stuff. Now, the other 3 are the kind of the meat of it. The main sensor is, get this, 50 megapixels, no longer 40. It's also using that red, yellow, yellow, green sensing array, just like last year's P30 Pro, but with more pixels. And it's absolutely massive. I'm not actually sure all the exact specs on this sensor, but it's bigger than pretty much any other sensor on the market right now, which is really, really big in terms of the size of the sensor, not the number of pixels. So it's not like 108 megapixel like Samsung, but it's still a very large sensor. 50 megapixels RYYB. The f-stop is f of 1.9, which is meh, but you know, on large sensors you get very nice shallow depth of field to start with anyway, so I'm not quite sure that's going to be a problem. And of course, optical image stabilization. I assume this is the main sensor based on the size of the lens. The next one is an ultra wide. The ultra wide is a 40 megapixel ultra wide. It's basically the same setup we saw on the Mate 30 Pro, where they use basically a really high quality sensor for ultra wide. So f over 1.8, which is pretty amazing for an ultra wide. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's pretty much the same as the Mate 30 Pro. Now, the telephoto, 5 times optical zoom, optical image stabilization, but unlike the past P30, P20, this is not just an 8 megapixel, it's a 12 megapixel sensor with an f over 3.4. But, here's the thing. This is an RYYB sensor. It's the same thing, super low light capable sensor. So instead of RGB, RYYB. First time we've seen a telephoto potentially of that quality. The proof is in the pudding. I'll have to try it out, let you know. So I'm super stoked about this camera system. On paper, this is really amazing. I love how they went 50 megapixel and they're still quad bidding with a quad Bayer filter. So the output of this is going to be 12 megapixel. The output of the 40 megapixel is also quad bidding and is going to be 10 megapixel. And this is going to be 12 megapixel native. So this is kind of the best of both worlds. Very large sensor, very large pixels. We don't know the exact pixel size yet, but I bet you it's around 2 microns when they combined, which is going to be pretty insane. And then we'll find out how it performs. So again, that's the P40 Pro, quickly in a nutshell. Again, 4200 milliamp hour battery, Kirin 990, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 or 128 gigs of storage. It's a beast. And you know, the big question is now, does it support GMS? Can you re-enable GMS on this phone to make it useful for a lot of people or not? If not, it's going to be a bummer. If you can, then perfect. And then the other big question mark for us here in the US is, on paper, this supports 5G low band on AT&T. So will it work? So obviously I'll let you know once I find out, but please stay tuned for more. I hope you like this video, you subscribe, tell your friends, comment in the comments below, click that little notification bell. And remember, this content is a supplement to the Mobile Tech Podcast. We're discussing the P40 this week on the podcast, so please tune in. mobiletechpodcast.com on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Spotify. And of course, subscribe, tell your friends. Remember, the show is what it's all about. So these videos are just the beginning. If you want to hear my thoughts on this phone, listen to the podcast. That's it, folks. Stay tuned for more videos. And until then, cheers, everybody.